live in front of an internet audience. We are here. The I'm Clifford Today show. And yeah. Woohoo! We are back. Seventh episode number 7 of the I'm Clifford Today show. Show some love. Let's all clap. And the Lisa is here today as well.
Hello.
She's Lisa today.
I'm Lisa today.
Yeah. Sorry. Did you want to show your face? So that people can know that you're a real person. Get down there.
Hello.
There you go. Hello. So, we're starting late. I'm sorry. Also, I'm hoping that with the audio that there's no echo this time. I forgot to make sure that that was okay, that was all good. But yeah, starting late today, and it's my fault. It's afternoon. It's officially afternoon, and I'm sleepy. But yeah, I was just up too late last night. In fact, I was getting ready for the stream today. I was getting some stuff ready, and yeah, it was just one of those nights. And I woke up, and my room was actually too cold for once. Which is different, is weird because last few days it's been pretty warm up here in my room in the attic. And then I guess it finally cooled down outside, and then so it got colder. And you know, when it gets cold and you're like, I don't want to get out of bed right now, and I feel like that was me. So, but we're here, and still the show is still going on, and we're not I'm not gonna cut the timing of the show. It's still gonna be like a regular show. Music by John Bartman. The intro music is by John Bartman, johnbartman.com. And today we're joined by the freewheeling Bob Dylan classic album. And I do love the album cover. It's like it's the cover of a rom-com or something. Classic album. So, yeah, today we're going to get into things, as we always do. And first of all, I wanted to mention that for those of you who don't know, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but we're on Twitch. Twitch.tv/I'm Clifford Today. It's not twitch.com, as I have mistakenly said in posts before. Twitch.tv, not DV, /I'm Clifford Today. What? You said oops.
DV.
Oh.
Not TV.
DV.
I mean TV, not DV.
TV. I'm so confused. I don't know what things are anymore.
Anyways.
So you can go check us out on Twitch. And, you know, of course we have the show that we're doing today is on there. But since Twitch is so insistent that, like, you need to do more stuff than, like, once every other week. Like, fine. So I thought of some interesting stuff to do on the show there. And right now I'm just doing some gaming streams. Right now I'm playing Stronghold. It's a classic strategy, castle sim strategy game from the early 2000s that I loved as a kid.
Me too.
Yes.
My whole family played it.
Yeah, we're all fans of it. It's not that well. I mean, people don't really know that much about it today, but um, you know, it's one of the games. It's like one of the few games that I actually can play on Twitch on this computer because I um I don't know really many other games, especially like games that I can play on a Mac, and I don't know. Someday I'll figure out how to like connect my PS4 or something that I can play on here, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. But for now, I'm just playing Stronghold games, and even if you don't know Stronghold, it's a good time to just chill and chat. You know, um, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do it, so that like people like I could just chat with people because it's a very chill, um, it's a very chill game. You know, it's the kind of game that you could just kind of have on in the background. Um, so, so yeah, Stronghold streams every Tuesday night and Thursday night. I mean, it's subject to change because I have a life, you know. Um, at 5 p.m. Again, you know, that time is a little flexible, as of course is this show. It seems. Um, but yeah, around 5 p.m. Tuesday nights and Thursday nights, play Stronghold for, you know, around a couple hours, and it's a fun time. I love playing that game. So yeah, again, twitch.tv/ I'm Clifford today. Go give us a follow over there. Let's see. Q&A. I don't have any questions from the last episode, so I'm gonna sneeze.
Bless you.
Thank you. I'm all stuffy. Um, but if you're watching the show today, right now, as it's live streaming, you can leave questions in the chat. Wherever you're watching, we're also streaming on Facebook. So you can give us a like on Facebook as well. But yeah, if you're watching right now and you have questions that you want an expert like me to answer, you can just go ahead and like leave something in the chat, and we'll address it at the end of the show. Um, unless it like pertains to like what we're talking about now, and then I'll probably address it right away. But either way, let's have some interactions in the chats. Let's go. Which, by the way, in my Stronghold live streams, I've changed that because that's a thing that like Twitch gamers say, is "Let's go," but in the Stronghold chat, since it's medieval times, we say "Let us advance." I don't know. I think it's clever. Yeah. So leave questions for a Q&A. That's about it. I think that's all. Also, just remember I had a recent video put up called "The Baddest of the Good." I mean, we had a whole episode talking about it, but I'm just reminding everyone that you can go check it out. It's a fun video I made with my friend Mitchell. Yeah. So, there was something right there that I was going to talk about, but I decided not to talk about it. So, that's my story. We're going to go on to the Jesus music. So, this is what we do on this channel, is that I watch Christian documentaries and I talk about them. But documentaries are interesting. Were you going to say something?
The only Christian documentary I've ever watched is Jesus Camp, and that's
Oh. Yeah, I
like,
still haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot
it's
about it.
it's interesting. No, that's not true. I've watched Father of Lights as well.
I don't even know what that is.
It's
Sounds like a Christmas movie.
no, it's this guy takes a video camera. It's a trilogy. There's Finger of God, um Father of Lights, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. But he was kind of doubting his faith, and just he's a videographer, and he's like, I'm gonna, as like a last ditch effort, um, go and to go to all these places that have God sightings, or like people say God is working, and he takes his video camera, and some of the stuff that he catches is really pretty wild. He like follows a missionary into India, and the missionary goes and like evangelizes to a witch doctor, and it's the missionary hears the audible voice of God every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it just gets direction from God as to where he's supposed to go and who he's supposed to talk to, and usually it's somebody who's seen him in a dream and like has a really deep conversation about Jesus, like imams and like these
Imams,
village gang members.
okay.
It's really cool. Some of it's really cool. Some of it's kind of like
sounds like end of the spear type stuff.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Anyways, much better than Jesus Camp, I'd say.
Well, Jesus Camp is like really depressing, right? It's like
Jesus Camp is like kind of a documentary against charismata. It's yeah, so is it really not recommended?
Is it really even a Christian documentary?
No,
like,
but it's
it just
like
happens to be about a Christian
camp.
Almost like a cult, right?
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of. I don't know. Yeah. I'd be interested in watching it with you, Bubby, just because. Oh, I call Clifford Bubby.
Yeah. Oopsie. Better get used to that around
here. Sorry. But
it's alright.
Yeah, I'd be interested in watching it with you, since you grew up with the charismata, and how much of it you'd be like, this is actually not that bad, or like, this is actually...
Yeah. It's, yeah, I'd be interested, because there's definitely, like, the crazy people from charismata, that, like, even I couldn't, relate to, but yeah, I don't know. We'll watch it and talk about it on the show.
Okay.
Because that's what we do on this show. But yeah. Also, I only just started recording a couple minutes ago. So I gotta stop doing that, forgetting to record while streaming. But hopefully that won't take forever to get the audio version up today. We'll see. Oh, maybe there's a way to like quickly take stuff off of Twitch. Maybe it'd be faster than YouTube. Anyway, sorry, that's a little a lot of baseball talk for you guys. Is that what it's called? Baseball? Inside baseball. Yeah. When you're talking about like the technological behind the scenes stuff that no one really understands.
Oh, I didn't know there was a term for that.
Yeah, it's something like that. I believe so. But anyways, okay, the Jesus music. The reason why I'm talking about it now is because some of you probably are thinking like, well, that came out last year. It's not really the newest thing. Well, I wasn't really interested in seeing it in theaters, and like, maybe when it comes out, like if it comes out on streaming or something. I didn't even know. I wasn't even like, I wasn't too excited to see it. Maybe a little bit of interest. But then it's like, oh, it's on Hulu now. Like, oh, okay, I guess I might as well. It's free. Even though it's not free because I'm paying for Hulu. But I was like, I might as well, and that could be an interesting thing to talk about on the show. And so, first off, I guess my general synopsis at the start of this review is that the Jesus music, it surprised me with the moments that I enjoyed from it. So there were parts that I liked about it. But overall, um it's as the kids say, it's mid. um Man, I'm such a boomer. It's just mid, bro. Um I was expecting to I thought I heard some people complaining about it as and how it didn't talk enough about the actual early days of, actual Jesus music, of how that movement started in the 70s and how they should have focused more on that. But I was actually surprised to find that they did talk about it a lot. There's a whole big, like, the pretty much the first act is dedicated to the 70s and how Christian music, contemporary Christian music, like, started. So, and I enjoyed that bit. That was probably my favorite part about it. And I learned some new things that I didn't know at first. So, but then, like, even in the middle, there's some interesting parts about, like the era that I was more familiar with Christian music, with like the 90s and some of the early 2000s. Um, but there are just like weird segments in it that I wasn't necessarily on board with, and we'll talk about it. I'm just giving my general synopsis of the documentary. Um, in terms of technically, it's a fine documentary. It kind of reminded me of the Hillsong documentary in terms of like it's polished. It looks like a professional documentary, um, but that doesn't always mean it's a good thing. For me, I love it when documentaries get a little artistic and not so much focused on like being a polished TV documentary, and that's what it kind of seemed like. So it was just kind of basic, but there were some things that I didn't like. Um, and this is just my opinion. Christian says I watched the documentary and I liked it. That's cool. I mean, there were things that I liked about it for sure. Um, Also, that's really cool to see, Christian. You're kind of like the guinea pig for this live stream. It's cool to see that my chat box is working on here, so you can see the chat in the video.
Yay.
So that's cool. For
Thank
some
you,
reason, it wasn't
Christian.
working for my Stronghold streams, so I don't know what's up with that. But anyways, there were parts where they there were some like live action reenactments of like particular stories with um like particular stories with like certain artists, and I guess I don't know, for some reason I'm like I don't know how I feel about that being live action. I feel like recently me and Lisa watched the Wild Wild Country documentary series, which is not for the faint heart. This is not my recommendation to all the kids out there, for sure. It's very graphic, but it's a very interesting documentary, and you learn a lot from it. I'm just saying, when there were things that they were talking about in the documentary that they didn't have footage for, they made these cool, like, they're like these drawings or paintings or whatever. And I kind of like that approach rather than like getting like mid actors to portray them. So but that's just me nitpicking, and it's just my opinion. Because like there was a scene where they had this little kid play really young Kirk Franklin, and it was just I don't know. But
Yeah, we've been watching a lot of documentaries recently.
yeah, mostly just because you've been on a documentary kick,
I've kind
kinda.
of been on a kick, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I have too because I watched this.
I have not watched the Jesus Music documentary,
Yeah,
so
so
I probably won't have much to say
it's okay.
as
You
far
can ask
as
questions if you really, because there's probably people on here that haven't even seen it yet, and they're
Sure.
like, I don't know if I should check it out or not. So like you can ask those important questions.
So which artists were the ones that were followed around?
um well, it was mostly like sit down and interview a bunch of artists.
Okay.
Um there were some artists that they did actually like kind of follow around to like just get footage of them doing stuff.
Okay.
And the big emphasis, I mean, it's clearly like pretty transparent in the cover and like the poster of this. They really do focus on Amy Grant, Toby Mac, Michael W. Smith, and Kirk Franklin. Like those four people
Okay.
for some reason. Which I mean, yeah, they were all like really important figures in Christian music today, but it was also, it's like I don't know, I kind of want to hear a little more from some of the other people, which we'll talk about that. But yeah, before I get into the details of the documentary, I'd say I think I gave it like a 5 out of 10, just because like I was just kind of, there are things that I liked about it and things I didn't like about it. So, but let's get into the details. So first, the documentary talks about the origins of Christian music, and I thought that was cool. It was cool to learn about all that, and I should have written down like actual more notes. They talked about the pastor that was like really crucial to the Jesus music movement, because back then, you know, the consensus with a lot of Christians was if your music has a beat, then it's of the devil, you know. Executus Prime says elbow cough. I don't know what that means. Hope you're not sick. So yeah, like if your music has drums and guitar, then it's like, you know, it's Satan music. So there weren't a lot of Christians that were okay with that. So like a lot of churches wouldn't allow bands to play, you know. But there's this one central figure who like really promoted it and really did a good job at supporting the movement and just really helped it out. And there's like artists like Resurrection Band, and they talked about a few people, and you know, something in me was like, oh, I wish they talked about him just a little bit more, but they gave him like, you know, a little blurb in the documentary. Like they talked about Phil Keaggy for like a second, and it also looked like that they actually had him in the studio for this doc, because he's still alive, of course. They had him in the studio, and it's like they just filmed a few seconds of him playing guitar, and it's like you don't see him again in the documentary. I'm like, what? So you brought him in the documentary. You probably asked him a lot of questions, and it didn't even like show up in the movie. So I can imagine what Phil Keaggy feels about his part in the documentary. I mean, I don't know. He probably doesn't care. But it's like, I want to hear more about Phil Keaggy. He's like, to me, he's like probably the greatest Christian guitarist that I know of. He's really great, especially for having missing a finger. He's one of my favorites. And then they talked about Keith Green as well,
Hmm.
and they gave him like a minute of talking about him, and like yeah, everyone, even Amy Grant was saying like how influential he was, and um, how just how important he was. But then of course, like they move on. They don't talk about his life or anything. They don't even talk about his death. Um, they did talk about it, and I appreciate this, how he was different in like the 60 seconds that they talked about him, how like the music industry didn't like him because he would release an album and then he'd give it away for free at concerts. So people wouldn't get any money for it. And I love that. I always love that about Keith Green, but then they move on, and of course they talk about Larry Norman for a long time, which in like Christian rock, even though he definitely wasn't the first to do it, but he was like the most influential. And so of course he's going to overshadow Keith Green and all that. And I like the stuff. I liked how they got into how controversial and unique that he was, and they don't paint him as like this perfect person, which he wasn't, and I liked that. Um, so that I liked. I still wish that they talked about Keith Green more, but you know, Larry Norman, I guess, is the king. So yeah, and then after the 70s, they got into the 80s. Um, so of course they talked about um, Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith. Uh, which, truth be told, I I didn't really grow up with Amy Grant. Like, no one in my family really listened to her, oddly enough.
Hmm.
Um, listened to a little. I was more familiar with Michael W. Smith growing up, but not even really much of his 80s stuff. So it was interesting to learn more about them, and it is interesting to learn how. I mean, I had been told this, but it was interesting to watch this in the documentary, how Amy Grant just like kind of shot her way to stardom, and like became popular not just within the Christian music industry but secular. Like she's on all these talk shows and such, and um so yeah, that was interesting, and how Michael W. Smith kind of was became popular because of her, because he started as this someone who toured with her as a band member. So and that's all fun because I didn't know much about Michael W. Smith and his 80s career, and just how different it was from his like 2000s career, which was like since the 2000s has been just saturated with worship music and such. It's interesting to know that he he was a pop star basically, and he had like fun music. Um, and also with Amy Grant, it was fun to well, not fun. It's interesting to know also like all the controversies with her, because like when she started getting into the secular world, um, you know, she had her song "Baby Baby," which uh, a lot of people didn't like because it wasn't about God, and it was about a relationship. And they're like, you can't be a Christian and just not talk about God in every single song that you do. And so that was interesting. And
And then Stacy Orico comes along, and her song "Stuck on You" is on Wow 2004.
wait, which one was that?
It's some song. It's about being addicted to.
Look at me, right?
I don't
Don't
remember.
look at me if you're looking for perfection.
It might be
Don't
that.
look at
Yeah.
me. Yeah, that's the one that I know. And my sisters listen to Stacey Orico, but that for some reason is the only one that I know. I think she also had. I wonder if the Don't Look at Me song was a response to that because she was getting popular,
Hmm.
and she felt a little self-conscious about that. And
Hmm.
she's like, it's not about me, it's about God, you know. So, but yeah, times have changed for sure, and we have like a lot of artists. Amy Grant was definitely kind of like the Lauren Daigle of her day.
Hmm.
Um,
For sure.
because Lauren Daigle's got her songs that have even been playing on secular radio. Um, I'm not really a fan of Lauren Daigle.
Oh,
Do-
Stacey Orico was the More to Life girl. There's gotta be more to life.
oh, I think I
Chasing
remember that
down
one.
everything.
But she didn't do the "Don't Look at Me."
I'm looking at her songs here.
Sorry, that was
Yes, she
someone who.
did Don't Look at Me.
Okay, that's someone who kind of fell off the face of the earth. I don't know. I wonder what she's been up to. Um, but yeah, so it was an interesting time back then because Christian music was a very new thing. And Amy Grant, like I admire Amy Grant for this. Like of course she's not a perfect person, but I admire that she's like just sometimes just want to write songs that are from me, and I want to be honest and genuine, you know. So that was interesting. Um we're also going to get into Christian metal, but um I think it's about that time to get into a little breaky wakey. I hate myself for saying that. I should immediately
I hate you too.
regret that.
I'm just kidding.
Thanks. No, it's true. We're gonna get into a little ad break right now, and we'll keep talking about the Jesus music. Riding with our tops down, listen to that Jesus music.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that reference.
Oh yeah.
Riding with my top down, listen to Jesus music, Jesus music. Doesn't really do that. Anyways, we'll be right back. You guys sit tight. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Just got to get a few things from the store, and we'll be back. All right. Bye.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
back. Greeting time is over. We're back.
Welcome back.
I kind of feel like our ad break is like the greeting time of the service.
Of church service.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Do you leave a comment in the chats? Does your church still do greeting time? Because the church that I worked at, they did it, and I remember like my first day there, I was like, what? People still do greeting time? You know, shake and howdy.
My church, thankfully, does not.
Well, yeah, because it's so awkward. Because like, go out, you're forced to go talk to people, and it's also the worst when it goes on for too long. It's like, okay, when are we gonna come back to service? We're just kind of standing around now. There's no one else to talk to. I just kind of quickly shook everyone's hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But yeah, and always 9 out of 10 times it was always broken. It was always stopped by someone saying, "All right, stop being friendly with each other now." Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm gonna say now. If every time that we come off from an ad break, all right, stop being friendly now. You've talked about that. You told me about
Peace of
that.
Christ be with you, and also with you. You go around saying that to people. It gives you something to say, at
Yeah.
least.
What if you went around saying like the force is with you, and also
You're in
with
the
you?
wrong church.
But you just do that to confuse people, and they're like, "Oh, and also with you." That's the only thing I know how to say.
Oh dear.
I'm gonna do that next time I go to Episcopal church. So first thing before we get back into it, Executus Prime, if you're still watching, so there's something weird. I'm using Streamlabs to stream this show, and I can see the chat. But when I looked at the YouTube chat and I saw your comment, I saw that it's like this little duck. I think it's a duck. Kind of looks like a duck, but when I look closer, it's probably just a person, a yellow person. And it looks like he's doing a dab. That's what I would have thought at first. But in my Streamlabs chat, it doesn't have the emoji for some reason. It just says elbow cough. So that's why I said elbow cough after seeing your chat. And I think that's how it showed up on the chat box on the screen. So I apologize for misrepresenting what you were saying. Also, Debbie's here in the chat. She says, I think Breaky Wakey is cute. Well, I'm glad.
You're the only one.
I'm never going to say it again. It's not going to happen. Also, Debbie, and she's watching on YouTube, she says, yay, Lisa's back this week.
I'm back this week.
Yes. They're mother and daughter, just for full transparency with you guys.
Yes.
Lisa's mom is watching the show. That's great. Okay, so glad you all are watching right now. So we're talking about Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith. I also wanted to say I had no idea like how like Michael W. Smith and Amy Grant are actually like really close friends. And like they still are. And it's like, why didn't y'all get married or something? Because like they're talking about all the other marriages that they went through. It's like, you guys are really close. But I mean, it just must have happened. Michael was probably already married or something. But, you know, I don't even know what I'm talking about. This is like tabloid stuff. But they talk about Christian metal, and I thought that was interesting. The only thing that the thing that I didn't like about it is that they talk about it in the 80s, and then they act as if like it stopped. Like it would have been really interesting if they went into like the Christian metal that I knew when I was growing up. I mean, granted, a lot of them have a lot of them have deconstructed and left the faith, like under oath and such. Um, oh, Debbie says, nope, no time for that at my church. 3 services to get people in and out of. That's true. Yeah. I think that's the main thing is that churches aren't doing greeting time anymore because there's just no time for it. It's like, oh, we can't fit people being sociable. That's okay. I don't think anyone really wants it back. But yeah, I wish that they talked about the Christian metal that I knew. But I guess it's just because like, it wasn't like it's not popular. Like we're only going to talk about the popular Christian music. It's like, okay, whatever. This was I should have mentioned at the beginning. This documentary was made by and produced by K-Love. So, and
It all makes sense
it does.
now.
Yes, especially I'm going to get into it at the end of the documentary. Like it's yeah. So they talk about like Stryper and Petra for a little bit, and that was like the one time, yeah, classic stuff. Yeah. That was really interesting. Especially when they were talking about how like the members of Stryper got saved because of what I should have written down notes, but there was this preacher, really popular preacher. It's not Benny Hinn, is it? Was he a preacher? I don't know why that.
He was a preacher.
Yeah.
I don't think it was him though.
Either way, he was like the one responsible for bringing them to Christ, like because they watched him on TV and they got saved. And then when
was it Billy Graham?
No, they do talk about Billy Graham in the documentary though, like more later in like the 90s, because he was also pretty influential in Christian music, more than I realized. But anyways, I'll have to look it up later. This preacher, and then like when Christian metal gets popular and Stryper gets popular, all of a sudden this same pastor that was responsible for bringing these guys to Christ is bashing Christian metal and saying that it is satanic and that there's nothing Christian about it. And it's just interesting to see like how they talk about how broken they were about that. And I think one of the members of the band actually had to leave because he was just so confused about stuff and like upset and stressed out about a lot of the hate that Christian metal was getting. I think so. But yeah, that was interesting. And also I wanted to say that this was like the only section that they let John Cooper talk in the documentary. The lead singer of Skillet. Which they hardly even talked about Skillet. They had him talk about Christian metal, and it's like, oh, this is a guy from Skillet. And I wonder, like, what did they keep out of this documentary? What did John Cooper say? I really want to know. And it's kind of disappointing that like that was the only time that they really let him talk in the documentary was about Christian metal, because I'm sure he has some really interesting opinions about what Christian music is, the state of Christian music today. But of course, they don't really let him talk.
Because they're K-Love.
Yeah.
And they've got a certain brand.
Exactly. And that's the big problem that I have with the documentary is like, I wish this documentary is very open and honest about a lot of stuff. And I appreciate that. But I think that it could have gone a little further. Because sometimes when they're open and honest about stuff, it kind of seemed like that they were more apologizing about certain things. Like, because they know that like modern audiences today would be upset about certain things. So they're like, let's talk about these things that are kind of controversial and do some like house cleaning, you know? So that's one of the big problems that I have with it. I have a bigger problem with it, but that's not until the end. And I want to go in order. So they talk about Christian metal for like 10 minutes and then they don't bring it up again. And then they get into the 90s, which a lot of people, and they even say in the documentary, a lot of people consider the 90s to be like the golden age of Christian music because it was so the 90s for music in general was very diverse in terms of like what was popular, because the 90s was just a time of like experimentation where like no one knew what everyone loved at the time. It was a great time because we didn't have like one genre that dominated everything. And so they talk about like all the different Christian personalities that came up out of the 90s. Like they talk about Stephen Curtis Chapman, talk about like Jars of Clay, Third Day, and they talk about Newsboys and DC Talk. They talk about, so you guys know me, like I'm a big like classic Newsboys fan from like that era.
So good.
It's great, like great stuff.
It's a
But I
real
felt
good
like
thing.
real good thing, yeah. I get that reference. A real good thing. A real good thing.
Mercy.
When we don't get what we deserve. Anyways, I feel like that they could have talked about Newsboys more. I felt like that they hardly talked. In fact, like they didn't really talk about Newsboys much until like later, of course, when they're talking about DC Talk and Michael Tate taking over. But also, the only members of the Newsboys that they interviewed was Michael Tate, which hardly counts because he's a DC Talk member, and Phil Joel. Like Peter Furler wasn't there for this documentary. Like they didn't even show a snippet of him like they did with Phil Keaggy or Dan Hasseltine from Jars of Clay. Like they only got like a snippet. They're like, yeah, they showed up for an interview, but we didn't use any other stuff. Peter Furler just wasn't there. So I was very surprised about that. And they let Phil Joel talk for like 2 minutes about stuff, which I was interesting. I didn't expect to see so much Phil Joel in this documentary, but then he was gone. And of course, they just have to talk so much about DC Talk, which I'm curious, and I was talking about this with my dad the other day because we got, well, it wasn't an argument, but more of like a discussion because my dad was like, that's interesting because I figured that like Newsboys was the more popular band. And I was like, no, as much as I was a bigger fan of Newsboys than DC Talk just like dominated the 90s because, you know, they had Jesus Freak, not just the song, but the whole album, which is like considered by many to be like the quintessential Christian album. For me, it's Take Me to Your Leader, though. And I think I'd like to have an episode or video or something, probably just like an episode debating and like polling, like having some polls to see like who is the more popular band, Newsboys or DC Talk. I'd be really interested to know like what those results would be, because like
we listened to Newsboys, but we didn't listen to much DC Talk.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely like the different kind of fan. Like you can tell a lot about a person if they were a Newsboys fan or a DC Talk fan. That's just kind of how it is. Like I liked both. I was a fan of both, but Newsboys was bigger for me, of course. And like Newsboys, they had a lot of number one hits. I mean, Shine, but yeah, I don't know. And I think that would be a very interesting discussion. But yeah, so not a whole lot of talk about Newsboys, but which there should have been. Everything, of course, gets dominated by DC Talk and how big that they were, because they were big. and they talk a lot about their breakup actually, which was interesting. They had, of course, they had Toby Mac and Michael Tate, and also Kevin Max, which was also kind of funny because he didn't get as much screen time as the other two, and like hardly talked that much in the documentary, and which is fine because like most people know today now that like Kevin Max is a very, you know, he's very like universalist Christian, if you can call that Christian. Sorry, I'm gonna get a little judgmental here. And he's very open about like his liberalism and such. So I wouldn't be surprised if he also had a lot to say, and it just didn't make it in the documentary because it's like that's not the direction we want to go with this. So I just thought it was funny that he didn't get as much screen time as the others. But this was like I feel like this was the first time that they really got open about why DC Talk broke up, at least to my knowledge. And that was interesting because they talk about how each of the members of DC Talk were so different from each other, which is kind of what made DC Talk work in terms of like a sound and such. But the thing was is that their personalities were also so different, and they got open about how like they would fight a lot, even like at shows, and they showed a clip of how it's like, where's Kevin? And they're like, he's gone. He's like, oh, great, we're about to start a show and Kevin's gone. It's like, I don't know where they got that clip, but it's like you can tell that Toby was frustrated. And so yeah, there was a lot of conflicts in the band, and it was very interesting to learn about. And they decided that they were gonna go on an intermission, and they even released an album called Intermission, and then they never came back. And yeah, they really focused in on that, and for me it was interesting. But it's like, oh yeah, DC Talk is like the darling of Christian music back then. And they did something really weird in the documentary as well. Like the interviewer like asked Toby, like, is there any chance for like DC Talk to come back? And then Toby Mac does like and then they cut. And they keep going on with the documentary, and it's not mentioned again. It's like, what was the point of that? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, just leave it open and ended like that. Like Toby was probably like, hey, don't put this in the documentary, but this and this and that. But like, why would they even show that? Like them asking the question. I feel like that's a little, I don't know, dishonest. But anyways, that was just weird. They also got into they talked about Billy Graham thing, and like they talked about how Billy Graham really helped like promote Christian music, I guess. And how there's like this big moment where Billy Graham came up to the stage and he started reading the lyrics to a DC Talk song. I forget which one it was. But like they were talking about how like that was really big for them. Like, oh, Billy Graham is like this big preacher. Now he's like reading out loud DC Talk lyrics. They're like, oh, that was like a big moment for us. Like, so that was cool. So yeah, they had that whole segment about DC Talk. Not enough about Newsboys. And oh yeah, and they also talked about how what each of those people are doing right now, and how Toby Mac's his solo career is like almost like advanced beyond DC Talk's career, and how like Michael Tate is now with the Newsboys and such. And that was the most talk about Newsboys. But they also had this segment talking, and this is where it's gonna get a little dicey right here in this episode, but you guys know what you signed up for. They start having this conversation about gospel music, like real gospel music. Um, and they talk about Kirk Franklin a lot, which I thought was interesting because they talk about Kirk Franklin as if he was like this huge thing. And I don't know, maybe it was because like his music didn't really resonate with me, but I didn't really realize that Kirk Franklin was like apparently so big, you know. Like I knew he was big,
Mhm.
but I didn't think he was like that big. I don't know. I mean, he has his revolution song. Do you want a revolution? Whoop whoop. You know that one?
I do not.
Oh.
No, I don't know.
Yo, turn this mic up so I can bless God's people. Oh wait, no, that's J Train. That's Toby Mac's song with Kirk Franklin. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting. I guess I did. Maybe I'm just not as familiar with that, but they go into this whole discussion about racism, and it's really weird, because they get a little vague with stuff, and not only just vague, but like really weird. They talk about how the church never really fully accepted gospel music or whatever, and how Kirk Franklin was kind of like that bridge from like the regular white church with the, you know, black gospel crowd and that music and such. And they made it as like it was just such this big deal about how in their opinion the church for the most part has like rejected like black gospel music. I'm like, I I
In,
personally don't see that.
in New Orleans, it's all gospel music.
Well, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, New Orleans, but like even with my family, and my family, you know, we're all like pretty conservative, and I was raised with my mom listening to uh Bebby and Cece Winans, which by the way, Cece Winans was interviewed in this documentary. She showed up a few times. Uh my mom listened to Babby Mason. Uh there's this other guy and his name isn't um I'm blanking out on his name. But there was that. My sister my sisters loved Out of Eden
Mm.
and Anointed, and um even like my brother at the time listened to Grits, you know.
Mm.
So like, you know, music from like Christian music from black culture was not a thing in my family. And like we mostly lived in like the Midwest and such. And so there so and maybe is the case that like maybe there are some like statistics or numbers that show that like, you know, white Christian people by and large didn't listen to gospel music, but like they don't show any stats or anything. It just seems like a lot of like word of mouth. And I'm just like, I I don't know. I don't know about this. And I don't think I necessarily agree that this was like as big of a deal as people made it out to be. Um but I mean, not to say, but here's the other thing is that like even if it were true, um can you really blame that on racism in the church? Because while it's true that like I did grow up with my family listening to quite a bit of like black gospel music and like Christian R&B and such, um I kind of grew up with like not wanting to listen to that stuff. Not because it was mostly because my family was listening to it and I like had a rebellious spirit in me. I was like, nah, I'm gonna listen to all this stuff. This is gonna be my thing because like, you know, I lived in a family of six, and I guess I wanted to have my own taste. So, which in my older years I've grown to appreciate that music more than I did as a kid. But it wasn't because like I think for some people, you know, just sometimes music from other cultures just doesn't resonate with people from other cultures as much. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine if like with a black person, if they're not really into newsboys, then, that's okay. And if they listen to more gospel music, like that's fine. Uh I think that just comes down to personal taste and like your culture and what you were raised with. Um, you don't have to make people feel bad for not listening to certain kinds of music, and especially you don't have to, blame it on racism. So
Yeah, I know. I, I noticed we would have at at JBU, my college,
mm,
which was interdenominational. Um, we had a Hispanic worship team that would lead every once in a while for chapel band. And they were a lot more celebratory in
mm-hmm,
their worship, whereas the typical um white person band uh would be more somber,
yeah,
or just would have more sad music, or just like
we're
more
all very sad.
lamenting.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think there were just differences in tastes,
yeah,
and
and
there's nothing wrong with that. It
yeah.
was wonderful having the Hispanic band
Mm-hmm.
share their culture, and there's a
Yeah,
lot of um just uh, there's there's diversity in music, and it's okay to choose what music you want to listen to.
yeah. Yeah, it's totally fine. I'm like, granted, maybe there is people out there in the church that's like, this is black music. I don't like this because I'm a racist. They say that to themselves. They're like, I'm a racist. Yeah, racism exists, of course. I'm
For
not
sure.
doubting that at all. But like, I just felt like that they were making too much of a big deal out of it. And of course, they also had Lecrae on the documentary, and of course, there's a lot that I don't agree with him on in terms of this topic. But yeah, it just seemed like it was a part of the documentary where they were like looking down at the church for, you know, not liking enough black gospel music. And maybe they can say like, well, yeah, because like not there wasn't enough black gospel music that was making it in the charts. So like, okay, maybe you can blame it on the radio stations. Maybe you can blame it on K Love. But of course they wouldn't do that and be like, maybe there were some executives that were like, "Oh, we just don't think that white people would like this music as much." Maybe there was. Maybe there's some like, guys in suits that were making those decisions. I
Yeah,
don't know.
that might have
Because
been it.
like charts work different these days. Like back then it all relied on radio stations and how often they would play the music. And sometimes that was dependent on like how often songs were requested, or but also what the radio people decided was good, basically.
Mhm.
Now, since we have streaming, that's also accounted for. And so we charts are now more affected by actual listeners than they ever were before.
Mm.
So back then maybe you could say that there were some executives that were making those decisions, and like I would not doubt that at all, and maybe you can, blame them for that. But I just don't agree with like making people in the church feel guilty for not liking certain music enough, especially since like from my perspective that wasn't really the case. but then again, like people are different. They're different families in different parts of the world are different. So I can't say that every mom listened to Babby Mason or CC Winans like my mom did, but anyways, and then they got into more like actual racism in the world a little bit, but that was where they got a little bit more vague. Like they showed this clip of Kirk Franklin um at this award show. I think it was the Dove Awards. Um and he was having this speech and he's like crying, and it's like we need to, like, when cops, he started it with like, when cops are killed, we need to say something about it. When black people are killed, we also need to say something about it. Let's not be silent on this issue. And then everyone claps, and I'm like, um, are we silent on these issues when these things happen as a church? And who is he talking about? Is he talking about like Christian artists? Like, should more Christian artists be singing songs about this? I don't know. There's just a lot of vagueness, and I feel like it was their attempt in the documentary to like make up for what a lot of people have accused them of being like silent on issues of racism and such. I mean, like I have my own opinions about it, of course. Like y'all should know, I'm pretty conservative on a lot of issues, but yeah, it was just a weird segment. Um, and then it was over. That part was over. So that part I wasn't really too crazy about. It was just too confusing, and what they were trying to say exactly wasn't very clear. So, but anyways, um this is getting more near the end of the documentary. They went into this part of the documentary where they talked about Christian artists who have moral failures and such. And this part of the documentary I actually liked, and it was very interesting because they talked about um like different stories. They talked about Amy Grant and how she went through a divorce, and how like that was like, especially back then, how like she was getting mail from people who were just like condemning her and such, and like just how big of a thing it was and how like hated she was for it. Um and they also talk about Russ Taff, which some of you youngsters probably don't know him, but he was originally from the Imperials, which was a big Christian group in like the 70s and 80s. And then he kind of went on his own solo career. But something that I didn't know is that apparently he went down like an alcoholic path, like pretty bad, and I think he got some heat for that. But it was also really cool to see because like um he's like friends with Bill Gaither, and how like Bill Gaither was very loving and supporting during that time in his life. And so that was really cool. And so yeah, they're talking about how like when Christian artists are imperfect, a lot of people in the church tend to uh, condemn, you know. And it actually got me thinking about myself, and rethinking some things of how I treat people in like the Christian music industry. And I I totally get it. Like I totally um sympathize with those artists that like, because like, we're not supposed to be perfect. We're not perfect. We're just saved by grace, and God willing, we do our best to live for God, but sometimes people make mistakes, and sometimes it gets out in the public eye, and it just kind of convicted me a little bit. And it's like I want to be careful with how um I handle those kinds of things. I don't think I've gone too far in the past, but and not to say that we shouldn't correct each other. I think there are definitely instances where Christian artists make mistakes, and there is a need to like speak out against it. Especially, I think the examples where I think there is an exception is when um, a Christian artist is like promoting false teachings and false doctrine unrepentantly. Kevin Max is an example. uh, or Derek Webb from Caedmon's Call. Um, I think that's the kind of stuff that needs to be spoken out against. In love, of course. I could probably be a little bit more loving in the way I address those things. But they need to be spoken out against. Or maybe when a Christian sins publicly. Like, there was that one singer that, like, he and his wife posed in these very, like, provocative poses at this event or whatever. And it was like, and they, it was like a joke for them, but it was the kind of thing that was like, no, you shouldn't do that. That's like very suggestive. Like, I'm not going to describe it because this is a family show, but it was just the kind of thing where it's like that's people were upset about, and I think that they were justified being like, hey man, like don't be doing that. Like what you do in your married life is fine, but like don't be doing that publicly in pictures for everyone to see. It's that kind of stuff where it's like unabashed, is that a word? Like unabashed sinning, and they just don't seem to care. So it's like, yeah, I think that's an instance where people can say like, hey, like, love you, and you're still a brother or sister in Christ, but that kind of stuff you got to stop doing, But there are times, I think, like, for instance, like when someone is going through a divorce, like we don't know all the stuff that's going behind that. There could be a lot to going in that. Or when someone is like struggling with an addiction, it turns out, and they're like really trying to, they're going through like a recovery. I think those are the kind of instances where, love and grace is important, because like you may think that like just because you don't know them and they can't see you, that doesn't like add up, and that doesn't affect them, because like if you have 100 people condemning you online, they're gonna see that, so I think there needs to be a balance. I think it was a very convicting part of the documentary where it teaches and correction. So I thought that was a very interesting part of the documentary, and actually made me rethink some things. So good job.
Good job, Jesus Music.
Good job, the Jesus
Good job,
Music
Caleb.
documentary. Yeah, good job, Caleb. Speaking of Caleb, so after that whole thing, Debbie says, love the Gaithers.
Oh, yes, our
Yes.
family loves the Gaithers.
You can't hate them, they're a fun bunch of
They're
people.
so precious.
So after that whole segment, they start going into the 2000s. And it starts off interesting. It starts off with Michael W. Smith talking about, because he had his worship albums. And I didn't realize, because I was so young then, how much of a career change that was for him, just to do like worship music, and how he really felt called by God to make that album. I think it was 2 albums he eventually came out with, and how like he kind of struggled with it, where God was like, write worship music, and Michael W. Smith was like, no. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not fun. I want to keep making like pop music. But then he did, and it just kind of changed everything. Uh, for the good or the bad, that's subjective, because that's kind of what, like, I appreciated how they were talking about how in the 90s, how a lot of it was focused on like egos, and like how everyone is like, it's all the crazy shows like the Newsboys with their spinning drums, and it was all about like personalities and like celebrities. Like, yeah, I can see that, but at least like the 90s had like creativity in its music, and like more expression than it does now, at least in like the contemporary Christian mainstream. You might be right in a lot of that, but I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because that's seemed like that's what they were doing. And so then they were like, we just needed to make a transition and be more focused on God. And so they start talking about how like worship music was started to take over. And this segment really shows uh how biased this documentary is, and it's very transparent that K Love produced this, because, and this is like the last segment of the documentary, how they're just talking about how great it is, like the worship music, and um it hasn't aged well, but they talk about Hillsong again.
Oh
um
no.
and of course this was released before like all the, the Hillsong expose documentary came out. This was like last year, so of course it's not really updated. Um, but like they're just talking about like the worship genre movement in such a positive light, and I've seen a lot of people, like a lot of reviews, criticizing this part, where it's like, of course now we realize that like K Love produced this, because they make it seem like it's such a change from the 90s. How the 90s was all about like celebrity and like making money, and it's like worship music is what's making money now.
Hmm.
Like, this is worship music is now the bread and butter of the Christian music industry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about it as if it's a good thing, how like Christian music, the worship music has become such a big thing now, and like we're more focused on God. And it's like, if you really look at it, like, no, it's still all about the money, it seems. And you watch the Hillsong documentary, it's about the money, and it's about, like brand and such, and it's just like, wow. It's so non self aware. And they talk about like Chris Tomlin and such, and like, you guys know my feelings about Chris Tomlin. um and Elevation, they show like clips of Elevation and Hillsong and all that, and it's just like, wow, this is um this is very transparent right here. And yeah, it's not going to appeal to a lot of like the people that I know that are like more fans of like the older Christian music, because that's the one thing that everyone complains about, is like Christian music is all worship music now. And this documentary like just paints it in such a good light, and how like Christian music is like better than it ever has been before. And yeah, it leaves a a very bad taste in my mouth. Like, don't get me wrong, I've been clear. It's not like that I don't like worship music. It's just it's overtaken Christian music, and you can't really do be successful and do anything else in the Christian music industry. And it's kind of a problem, especially with the problems that I have with modern Christian music, modern worship music, whatever, it's the same thing. With like the emotionalism and like the lack of thoughtful lyrics and like theological lyrics and such. I know not everyone has those complaints, but like those are my problems with it. And so yeah, in the end it was just not it just didn't leave me with any strong positive feelings about it, about the documentary, and it was kind of disappointing. There are some good things in it, you know, talking about the early days of Christian music, and I appreciated it. But yeah, I don't know. I think I think there are things that they should have talked about. Like I already mentioned some of them. Like they oh, there's one person that they didn't even mention at all. There was no mention of Rich Mullins, which I found very shocking because he was very influential in his time in the Christian music industry, and there was not one mention of him. And I don't understand why.
Maybe they asked him if, and he was like, "No, I don't want to be."
Well, baby, he's dead.
He's dead.
Yeah.
Maybe his people that
like, no, I'm in heaven. I'm not. I'm not coming back
maybe they
down there.
asked his people and they were like,
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why Peter Furler wasn't there. Um, although Peter Furler wasn't there too, because he was also kind of a controversial figure in Christian music and a bit more influential than people seem to realize. But no, they just kind of gave him a few seconds to talk about certain things, and I'm sure he has like a lot more to say about Christian music, but of course it doesn't make it in the documentary.
"We should make a real Jesus music
Yeah.
documentary." But
I'd have to do a lot of research, but yeah, I should reach out to all these people and interview them. It's like, hey, we're gonna make a better Jesus music documentary. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of like what I try to do with my channel. I try to take interesting stories from like the Christian music industry and you know bring them in a package and talk about them and show them to the world. So because I just think like those stories are interesting, but yeah, I don't know. That was the Jesus music, and if you guys had any questions about it at all, because I can't really think of anything else to say. Baby, did you have any questions about
I
it?
do not.
That's fine. I talked a long time about it anyways, and let's see, how long has this been going? We're about an hour and a half, but so we can stop the conversation here. I also think that they should have at least mentioned Bob Dylan.
Dylan was right.
Dylan was right. The times they are changing. This is a worship song that people play in church at their youth group. But like, I don't know. Bob Dylan he had his Christian music phase. Apparently he's still a Christian. Are you okay? You got a headache?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, they could have mentioned him at least. But yeah, he's apparently still a Christian. He's not really as open about it anymore, but he still like believes, I guess. So that's cool. Okay. So that's that talking about the Jesus music. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I thought it could be a lot better. Which by the way, it was directed by the same people who directed. Oh yeah, that was another weird thing. So it's directed by the same people who directed the I Can Only Imagine movie and the Jeremy Camp movie, I Still Believe. And there was like a little section where they were talking about Amy Grant and the lead singer of Mercy Me, because Amy Grant was very big in like Mercy Me's popularity, like how they started, and they used a clip from the movie. It's like footage in the documentary.
Hmm.
It's like, shameless plug there, huh? Like, so that really took me out of it right there. Like that was very unnecessary. It's like they're like, hey, we have a movie about that. Let's
How
show
funny.
a clip of it. Like it's not even the real people; it's they're actors. Oh yeah, Lisa. Your mom says Rich Mullins died in '97. So
Thank you, Mom.
she's schooling you.
I was 5 years old.
I
would not know.
95. I would have been 3. Yeah.
I cradle robbed you.
Yeah. I actually I met the guy who was, because Rich Mullins died in a car accident.
Oh.
I met the guy who was in the car accident with him. His name is Mitch McVicker, and he's a singer, and he's not that popular. You can probably find his stuff, out there. And he played at my church one time.
Oh.
And he talked about, like, because he toured with Rich Mullins, and how he survived the car accident that took Rich Mullins' life. And it was like, oh, wow, that's cool. And I got to, I remember chat. So there was a lot that I was going to try to get to in terms of music reviews. And there's a lot. And I'm going to try to get through them all as much as possible. So I wanted to talk about Judah and the Lion. I know that they're not like they're you know, they've gotten really popular in like the secular world. You know, they've had their hits. But they started out in like the Christian indie music world. So, and I know Judah, the lead singer, is still a Christian, and he has his own solo stuff. Okay. I mean, you can just tell me. You don't have to text. Lisa's going to get coffee, everyone. It's all right.
I didn't mean for it to be like a known thing. I'm coming back.
Okay. It's fine. But people are going to be like, what's he looking at? She'll be right back. So Judah is still a practicing Christian, and he has his own solo stuff that is very Christian. Judah and the Lion has kind of become a bit more, you know, accessible to general audiences. So, yeah, especially with this song, I want to talk more about like Judah's solo stuff, because I like his. I tend to like his stuff a little more, especially when it comes to being Christian music. But I just wanted to talk about this. They had a new single called Scream, and basically it's a song that's kind of like the voice of the young generation about people. It's just about people like being really stressed out, and just sometimes you gotta scream. And I'm sure a lot of young people will appreciate this, how it like you know, voices their feelings. You know, it's like, oh, this song saved me. And it's a fine song. I know that Judah and the Lion has lost one of their members. He's left the band on good terms, so it's now a duo, I guess. It still sounds pretty strong. It's not my favorite from them. Judah and the Lion has become more of a band that like I keep on my radar, and I check them out every so often, but I don't listen to them as much as I used to. You know, they started out as pretty like straightforward folk, like indie folk. They even started out like really Christian. they're not so much anymore. Like I said, they're more accessible, which is fine, but I just don't have as much of an attachment to them as I used to. And Scream is okay. It's not their strongest song, not even from their new stuff, but it's fine. I think they're working on going towards releasing a new album, and I think this is from it. So, but Judah and the Lion fans, I think, will like it. It's just not really my thing. I'd much rather listen to Judah's recent solo stuff, but anyways, that's Scream from Judah and the Lion. And then now, and this isn't showing up on the thing, is it? Okay. This is okay, it's not. The Porter's Gate, which that's the band. The song is called The King Is Coming. It's a single from The Porter's Gate. And the reason why I'm talking about this, because I haven't listened to The Porter's Gate before. I think I've heard their name before, but I'm talking about this because it's a single that features Josh Garrels and Tyrion. And you guys should know by now that I'm a huge Josh Garrels fan, and I love it whenever he releases music. And this is a fun song. It's like a gospel song. Very Christian song, worshipful, but it's got this really cool, like old school gospel bluesy kind of feel to it. Though I will say that, Josh Garrels has such an amazing, beautiful voice that he kind of outshines everyone else in the song. That the singing before he starts singing his part in the song is very run of the mill. It's it's fine. But then he shows up and it's oh, it's so good. It should just be a Josh Garrels song, but that's fine. But it's really good, especially the parts where Josh Garrels comes in and sings. I would recommend it. Sorry. Up next, we got a new single from Keith and Kristen Getty. It's called Come to Jesus, Rest in Him. And it's really good. It's really beautiful. I'm a big fan of Keith and Kristen Getty's music. And it's also a collaboration with Jordan Coughlin and Matt Merker. I think they're the main singers on the song, but it's just beautiful. Really pretty song and really worshipful. All you worship leaders out there, I would recommend this as a good contender for a song to play on Sunday. Keith and Kristen Getty just make really great music, and this is no exception. I also wanted to say that they have a new album that came out last month. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I plan to. And I'll talk about it when I listen to it. I'll give my review on it, but it's very Irish, which I love, of course, because it's the Gettys. But yeah, Come to Jesus, Keith and Kristen Getty. Check it out. You like the Gettys, right? You're a
I
fan.
do.
Yeah.
I'm back.
Yeah, Lisa's back. She got her coffee.
I love the Gettys.
Yeah. This one is a new single. Actually, two. It's a single, but it's two songs. New music from the Worship Initiative, which I'm pretty sure Shane and Shane started.
Yep, it's Shane and Shane.
Yeah, but right now it's not. It's not just Shane and Shane anymore. Like a Worship Initiative song doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna be on it.
Right.
They have other people on it now. It's become its own new thing, which is cool. Shane and Shane is on one of the songs, so it's two songs: "Come Lord Jesus Come" and "Refuge." "Come Lord Jesus Come" features Aaron Williams and Davy Flowers, and "Refuge" is the song with Shane and Shane, and I like them both. Not a whole lot to say about it, except it sounds like a Worship Initiative song, which means that it's pretty, and I like the lyrics in it. There are worship lyrics that I approve of it. And but of course my favorite is the Shane and Shane one, just because they have such a great vocal presence and they're very passionate in in their performance. Um, and yeah, they're just great songs, great lyrics. So Come Lord Jesus Come / Refuge from the Worship Initiative. We're getting through these pretty well. We're doing a good job. Next, I really debated whether talking about this, but this is some new singles from Emery, and Emery was one of my favorite bands. Like in my adolescent years, like growing up from my adolescent years, they're like a big tooth and nail band. I've always I appreciated their artistry and just their sound. They're just a really solid band, very unique as well. They had their own unique sound, and it's kind of like, I don't know what you would call it. It's like screamo mixed in with just like emo rock, like atmosphere. I don't know the terms. I'm a music reviewer. I should know these terms. But like if you know Emery, you know Emery, and they have a new album coming. Talking about them is because the members of Emery they're now known for starting the movement. Like they have the Bad Christian podcast, and they're kind of a part of like that more like progressive movement of Christianity. And I'm not one to judge. I'm sure I used to listen to the Bad Christian podcast in a very weird phase in my life. There were some things that I appreciated about what they did. But now it's just like I don't think I'm on board with a lot of the things that they believe. But I haven't listened to them in a while, so I don't know where they're at. And I don't know where the other members of Emery are at, but I'm just gonna talk about them anyways. Because they're just known in the Christian music realm. Like people know about them. And so with this new album, I guess the new unique thing about it is that it's recorded live. It was like recorded live, like kind of like Beatles style. And you can keep that in mind, but like as I was listening to it, I was like, man, the trouble is that like I can tell that this is live just by the way that it's mixed. It's not terrible, but for me it was lacking a lot. Like I'm listening to it and I can tell that there are only two guitarists. There are only two guitars in this song, and that just kind of makes it sound a little empty in some parts where I'm kind of wanting some more oomph. And that's the sad thing, is that like it just sounds like a really good live album, but like when I listen to it, at least the singles, I haven't, of course the whole album isn't out yet, but when I listen to it, I'm like, I want to hear the studio versions. Because like I'm sure that like if there were studio versions and then these came out, I would be like, oh, this is like a good live performance of these original songs, but the studio version's better. That's kind of what I end up feeling the whole time, and it's sad because it's like they sound like that they could be good songs, but it didn't blow me away or anything. So I was a little disappointed in it. But if you're an Emery fan, you can check it out, and maybe you have a different opinion than me. But for me, I'm not too excited about this project. But anyways, that's Emery. I don't know you at all. This one is a very interesting one to talk about. So this happened. Owl City, of Firefly's fame, has made a remix of Smash Mouth's big hit All Star.
What?
Yeah. And it's kind of a jam.
That's awesome.
Owl City is actually really good at remixing He's a good like producer. He made this really cool remix of Jesus Freak by DC Talk like sometime last year or before, I forget. But Smash Mouth just let him make a remix. And here's the thing. A lot of people don't like All Star just because like it was overplayed. You know, it's the Shrek song, I guess, even though it wasn't originally made for Shrek. Um, that's what people know it as, and so people are kind of over it. But I've always kind of been a defender of All Star. Like yeah, it's overplayed. Yeah, it's the Shrek song, but like I liked it before it like got really big, and so like I'm still a defender of it. And now Owl City has added his own flair to it, and it's so much fun. I'm most likely going to be listening to it a lot, and so yeah. I mean, I know it's not originally a Christian song, but you know, Owl City is a Christian, so I think this is just a fun thing for him to do. He also, it's cool because he adds his own like harmonies to things, and so it sounds really crisp and clear, and the production is great on it. So, yeah, All Star, the Owl City remix. I recommend it. It's a bop for sure. I think. Oh yeah, that's all of them. That is all. Trying to think. Yeah, no Q&A, I guess. No one's got any questions. That's okay because we're coming to the end anyways. I did I mean, if you guys are watching this, you know, after the fact, after the live stream, you can always leave a question in the comments or any kind of comment because I'm probably going to read it anyways in the next video to address it. But yeah, leave a question or a comment in this video, and we'll talk about it. We'll mention that in the next episode. Right now, so like I'm coming off, you know, releasing my last video, the goodest of the bad video, and so I'm not like deep into a project just yet, but I am getting started on my next video. I think I mentioned that I was probably going to get started on 2 videos simultaneously, but my interest is kind of magneted towards one of them in particular. So just depending on my you know, what I'm really enjoying doing, I'm probably going to be focusing on this video a lot more. So I'm working on a new mini documentary, you know, in the vein of like my KG52 documentary and my As I Lay Dying documentaries. And I'm talking about John James, the former lead singer of Newsboys, before Peter Furler. Well, they shared lead vocals, so it's technically not really before Peter Furler. But I'm going to be talking about his testimony and like what his life was like after leaving the Newsboys. And for those of you, if you guys don't know like what happened, it's quite a story, and I can't wait to put it all together in one package of a video. I'm really excited, especially, you know, you guys know I have a passion for old school Newsboys, so this is a treat. And this was pretty much an idea inspired by Lisa, which when she gave the idea, I was like, why haven't I thought about this before for a video? So it's a good idea, and I'm excited, and I'm doing a lot of research. I'm going through a lot of footage that I can use, because there's a lot out there, and it's going to be a matter of like picking what works best for the video. So it's probably not going to be out for a while, but I'm just letting you guys know that's what I'm working on right now. I also might be working on my other video about Showbread and The Chariot, 2 bands that I listen to a lot, and talking about their last albums. and comparing the two. I think it would be a very interesting video, but I'm probably going to be more focused on the John James video for a while. And if I get bored of it, I might hop onto that other video. We'll see. So yeah. Anyways, I think that's about it. Is there anything else, baby?
I love
you wanna
you,
say?
the bubby.
I love you, the baby.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. I always love having you on.
It was fun.
Yeah. Sorry, there probably wasn't as much for you to talk about.
That's
this time
okay.
around.
I wasn't. I'll be more prepared next time.
No, it's okay. We didn't plan for this really. I should let you know, like, if you are gonna be out, coming over the weekend that I'm recording a show, I should prepare you. But
That's all right. Next time.
that's okay, 'cause we all fall.
Oh my goodness, I thought of that song too when you said that's okay.
I actually had to keep myself from saying it, but then I just went
Good
ahead
for
and
you.
said
I'm
it.
so proud of you.
If you guys don't know what we're talking about, watch the video look up the video on YouTube where the kid is skiing
Yeah.
in the snow and they have him mic'd up.
Snowboarding.
Yeah. Oh, snowboarding. Yeah. Let's go, Shredder Dad.
It's so cute.
It is cute.
It's one of my favorites.
And I keep quoting it. I'm a Stuckosaurus. Anyways, let's get out of here. Thank you guys so much for watching the show. It's always a treat, and always a treat chatting with you guys. It's the I'm Clifford Today show. Thanks again for Lisa for being here. Be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. If you leave a review, we'll give you a shout out on the show. You can also leave a rating on Spotify for all you Spotify listeners. And also for you Spotify listeners, I always leave questions and polls on Spotify. And if people interact with those, we talk about it on the episode. Also, Podwood Forecast. It's the other podcast that I have with my friend Mitchell. I'm actually working on editing a new episode that's going to be coming out very soon, where we talk about the movies A Simple Plan, directed by Sam Raimi, and the documentary American Movie. Also, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Twitch, and be on the lookout for the new videos, and also the Stronghold streams that I'm doing. A lot going on, but you guys have a great day, and I love you all, and remember that I'm Clifford today, and you're not. Bye.
Bye.